Welcome to the Geniuses of Copywriting podcast, a peek into the minds and strategies of the world's greatest copywriters, marketers, and persuasion experts. And now, here's your host, Brian Casangina.
Hi guys, welcome to the call. I'm really excited to have my good friend Lorrie Morgan on the call today. So thanks for joining us, Lorrie. How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you for being patient with my internet connection.
That's fine, yeah. I thought all you Americans had awesome internet connections.
I know. Not in the country, I guess.
That's all right. You're worth the wait. So let's dive right in, because I'm really interested in about your story and where you came from, how you came to become a copywriter.
Cool. Well, I didn't know what a copywriter was, honestly. When I was, growing up, I didn't know you could make money doing this. So I kind of fell into it. I'm curious to talk to you too at some point about your story. But most of the copywriters I know who've been around for, over a decade, they all kind of fell into it, which was really interesting. Now I think there are copywriters who follow a specific path. But for me, I actually wanted to be an actress. And my parents were like, you're not studying acting in college. That's ridiculous. Yeah. So I studied journalism, and I have a journalism degree. And as soon as I graduated, I came to California to be an actress. So take that, parents. Yeah. But it turns out I suck as an actor, so that was okay.
Well, I find that hard to believe.
I do. I really do. I do. I certainly wasn't as good as I thought I was. That's for sure. I was kind of waiting to be discovered, and instead I was a really, really good waitress. And that's where I met my first husband, where I had 2 kids. And then when I had kids, I was like, whoa, this is better than anything I've ever done in my life. And that was like, I felt like I found my purpose, and all I wanted to do was just be a great mom. And I get to stay at home with them and, do finger painting and go to museums. It was wonderful. And then I ended up getting divorced, and then I had to get a job, which really sucked. Yeah. So, and still no copywriting though, still, mind you. So I have a journalism degree. I don't really have any work experience except waitressing. So I decided to be an executive assistant, and I was, I kind of was really good. I'm a good talker. I was able to talk my way into being like the top level executive assistant to the CEO of a marketing firm. So it's like a pretty big deal. And I was his assistant for a few years. And then, God, I missed my kids. I missed them so badly because, it's, when you work away from home, you're gone a long time. And it was just very different from the early years. So the whole time I'm at work, I'm thinking, how do I figure out how to make money from home? And that was also about the same time the internet started becoming, a concern or something that, you could actually work from almost anywhere. I mean, we're talking from across continents. It's amazing that how far it's come even. Sure. But so this is in the 90s, the late 90s. My boss retires. And so I just decided to not get another job. I was like, I can write from home, right? Because people send documents through the internet. Somehow I'm going to make this work. Yeah. And so I started I'm still not a copywriter, still didn't know what a copywriter was. So I was writing press releases. I was doing people's admin, like as a virtual assistant. I was doing, website stuff, which was copy, but I didn't really know direct response at that point. And so then I got a client who wanted me to write a 52 autoresponder series. I'm like, what's an autoresponder? and he showed me, he gave me some examples, and I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. And he showed me some pages of long sales copy of Dan Kennedy and Gary Halbert. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Where's this been all my life? Yeah. I absolutely fell in love with it. And this is like in the early 2000s. And I was like, okay, I'm going to be the best there is. How am I going to do that? Because back then, there wasn't the kind of access to training that you have now. So, right? I mean, you could be in an agency and be copy cubbed or copy chiefed, I guess.
Yeah.
But unless you kind of knew the ropes, you really kind of didn't get in it. So I started going to marketing events, and that's where I actually built a lot of my networking, a lot of my foundation. That's where I met Gary Halbert and John Carlton at the same event. Whoa, like major fangirl moment.
Yeah.
Really. And so, and one thing I have to say, even though it's not that I'm shy, but I'm kind of introverted. As I've been talking with other copywriters about this too. Like, we do a lot of work by ourselves. And so when you get around a lot of people's energy, it can be really draining, right?
Yeah.
You feel like that? Does that happen to you?
Yeah. Sometimes, yeah.
So I've always been able to just be fearless and walk up to anybody and talk to them and start up a conversation. So I had no problem like walking up to Gary, walking up to John and starting conversations. And I ended up hiring John, and not right away because I was broke.
Yeah.
But I had a credit card. I ended up hiring.
Yeah.
Right. So I hired John Carlton to be my mentor. And this was back in the day when he had limitless email. You could email him as many times as you wanted, and he would get back to you when it was convenient. Yeah, it was great. And he was almost always getting back to you like right away. It was amazing. It was really great. He said that Harlan Kilstein killed that program because he took advantage of it.
Interesting.
So, right? So that program is gone. But I started going to events of his. He would invite me as the female perspective. So I got to start going as a guest expert. He's super funny too. I love just hanging out with him, and through going to his events and working with him, I got to meet a lot of other copywriters and just kind of spread that. So that's how I got into that circle, and we're still close. He's my favorite mentor.
Yeah.
Gary, of course, is Gary. Gary Halbert is, incredible.
Yeah.
I also was able to study with Dan Kennedy. He had a 13-person boot camp for copywriting in his hometown, like outside of Cleveland, in the middle of nowhere, in January. Nobody goes,
It sounds cold. Yeah.
It's freezing. But you do it for Dan, right? Yeah. It was amazing. Just 3 days with his wisdom. So I had some really good background, some really good instruction. I'm very blessed that way.
Yeah. And that's something that I find is really key, to get that kind of training. It wasn't really until I got my own mentors, like my main one, who I've studied with in person, was Trevor Tokaka Cook, a fellow Aussie copywriter who's written stuff for Ed Dale and Frank Kern, and that was when things really started moving for me as well.
Right. I think it does. It just, there's something about having like almost a big brother or somebody who's there to show you how to navigate. It's because it's kind of a sticky business.
Yeah. I think that's what happens with a lot of new people coming into the industry. There's so much, especially now with all the information that is available. Like even when I started 15 odd years ago, there wasn't all that much around. It was starting to come into the age of where you could get different copywriting courses. My first one was a box I got by mail order, and it had videotapes and cassette tapes in it, and it had one CD. And so that's how long I've been doing this. But even back then, there wasn't so much around, But one of the important things, I guess, was probably Facebook wasn't around, so there was none of these instant Facebook experts.
Oh yeah,
talking about their amazing copywriting skills after reading one book. But it's a completely different scene now.
It is a different scene. It definitely is. I think it's really important though to be part of, like, to go to live events and to actually see people in person. Like we were really lucky to be able to like have lunch together, right? I mean,
yeah, that was great.
It was great, but it's just making those kinds of connections really makes all the difference. And I think that's one of the reasons I was able to forge a friendship and a mentorship with John Carlton, was because we were in the same room together. And I just think it's really important. And I think right now, I wish this was around when I was starting out, but Copy Chief, Kevin Rogers' Copy Chief, is probably the best launching ground that I've seen for copywriters. It's got leads, they have freelance advice, they kind of incubate you. I think it's a really wonderful program. Kevin put together a great program. And what's kind of funny is there's a handful of copywriters. I'm one of them, with John Carlton and Kevin Rogers and Harlan and a bunch of people, David Garfinkel, a ton of people that you would know their names.
Yeah.
And we talk, we email back and forth and give each other advice and whatnot. And Kevin said he wanted to start Copy Chief a few years ago. And we're like, oh, stupid idea, don't do it. And it turns out to really be the gold standard of what there is. So I think if people are starting out now, that's a really great place to go. That's very accepting, and I sound like a sales page for them, but really they are.
Yeah. What's your affiliate?
My affiliate number is.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, Kevin's someone I want to talk to as well. He's one of the guys who I met in Orlando last year, and he's really sharp. So I know a few people in that. I know a few people in that program. So yeah. So but
you probably don't need it now. You're the big guy in my
I don't know about that, but let's get back to you. This is about you. So let's stop advertising Kevin Rogers for the moment.
Okay, deal.
Let's start advertising Lorrie Morgan. So I want to come back to your acting days, your Hollywood days, because that's really a good point of interest. Because I think that that whole thing with the whole scene, the ability to put on that persona is very important in marketing. So how did it affect you as a copywriter, or your experience in that?
Well, there are actually a lot of correlations between acting and copywriting, which I think is one of the reasons I fell in love with it so hard, because you definitely have to have a lot of empathy for your character when you're acting. You have to get into their shoes, right? You have to do deep background research and think of their stories. And it's interesting, one of the things that I did when I was learning copywriting from it, here's how I learned copywriting. I saw sales letters like Dan Kennedy's, like Gary Halbert's, and I would copy them by hand until you start seeing a pattern emerge. And it's sort of like the skeleton of what the copy is. And then it's like, oh wow, okay, so this comes first and then this, and it's like a rhythm, like a cadence. So that's how I started it. And one of the things that I realized was it's a one-to-one relationship with copy and the reader. So there's me, the copywriter, and then there's you, the reader, and it's a connection. So I needed to know a lot about who my reader was and who was the ideal client, if you will. So what I did was I called them, I thought I made this up. This is kind of funny because it shows you how gullible I am, or how naive I am. I thought I made up avatars. Now, I didn't call it an avatar. I called it a target. So you have your target and your market. So you have this big target market, this mob of people that you want to sell to. And then you take a single person out, and I called it a target. And then come to find out, people call them personas, avatars, and blah, blah. So I thought I made this brilliant concept up. But basically, it is taking the qualities of the mob that you're marketing to and distilling them down to a single person, and not even like, oh, age range 35 to 50. No, I want you to think of a 36-year-old woman who has 2 children. I mean, very, very specific, because the more real you can make your target, your avatar, the more you're going to connect when you're actually writing the copy. And that's directly from character studies and acting. That's where I came up with that idea. And so I did carry that over into the copywriting. I think it's that deep research and the connection more than anything, rapport and conversation, dialogue, those kinds of things that you read in a script, they make it more, when you carry them over to copy, they're just a lot more readable.
Yeah. I've heard that people like, who was I thinking of? I heard that Woody Allen is a former copywriter.
Did not know that. How funny.
I read this somewhere, and who's the nerdy guy out of the original Ghostbusters movies? What's his name? Rick Moranis?
Rick Moranis. He's a copywriter?
I'm not sure. These people are probably, I think they're just copywriters before they made it in Hollywood. And I've heard some other interesting people. So it's interesting to hear, the correlations between, because I suppose you get into a character as an actor, and that's very similar process that you do to get into the mind of your target or your avatar when you're writing copy.
Yeah, you definitely do, and I do think that gives me a bit of an advantage, or anybody who studies arts. I know a lot of copywriters who are musicians too, right? I mean, which I find is really interesting. I started playing the drums for about a year, and then I moved. I got divorced and got into horses instead.
But so probably even a more expensive hobby.
Yeah, right. So true. But the thing I feel about musicians is that there's a certain rhythm in copy, and that there's that cadence, and that they relate to that. So that's why I always wanted to go to a few more of these events in the States, because I play myself. I'd love to get up on stage with John and Kevin and everyone else. So right? Really what do you play?
Guitar.
Okay. Oh my gosh. See, that's funny.
All copywriters are guitarists.
I know, or something, or drummers, or it's funny.
I did that for years before I ever became a copywriter. So
there you go.
I just found something online. I knew there was Alec Guinness was one of them. So Alec Guinness, Hugh Hefner. I'm just reading from this list online. Rick Moranis and a few other people. So it's really interesting that they actually wrote copy before they made it. Yeah,
that really is. That is. I had no idea. I think I need to do an article about that now.
It's going to be a good article.
Morgan, the amazing actress from Baywatch. I was on Baywatch. Did you know that?
Yeah, I think you mentioned it the other day.
Yeah.
So tell me about that.
Well, it's funny, after I had kind of given up on acting, my kids were at preschool, and they had a fundraiser, and my then husband bought, you bid on this auction, and he bought me a walk-on for Baywatch.
Okay, cool.
So then I went on, and they liked me, and they hired me. They kept having me come back to do its background work. Basically, I was just in a bathing suit and playing volleyball. And one time I was in a scene with Andre the Giant. That was kind of cool.
Oh, he was on Baywatch as well.
Yeah, he was a guest star on one of the ones that I was in. But at any rate, I had given up on acting, right? And then suddenly I'm working regularly, and then I finally got my Screen Actors Guild card, my SAG card, which is like the hardest thing in the world to actually get. Okay. So when I finally gave up, that's when I started being successful.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Is Andre tall in real life?
Yes, he was enormous. He, in this particular scene, I had a son, and he was Andre was in a cage, and He was like
just a full stereotypical character.
Exactly. Well, it wasn't a very deep show.
No, that's fine though. I'm also going to ask you about as well. You mentioned that the Kevin Rogers Copy Chief was a great way to get started as a copywriter. I know that's not open at the moment because even though it is for newbies, I'm still waiting for it to reopen back up because I missed out last time. But what are some other good ways that that you would suggest to get started as a copywriter? Because I don't know if you would suggest the Hollywood route for all new copywriters.
That may be kind of a meandering way to get to copy.
What's the fast track way?
The fast track way would be definitely get your chops. Learn, take a course, and there's a lot of really good ones out there. I have some as well at my site at redhotcopy.com.
Yeah, I bought one years ago. I can't remember. I have no idea what it is, but it was so long ago. But yeah, I would definitely advise that too. Yeah,
I think it's you definitely want to. It'll give you confidence too to go through more than one program. I don't think just having one program is necessarily the way to go. People learn different styles and from different
I agree.
Personalities. So I think taking more than one course is good. The way I really built my business, like I said earlier, was going to live events and actually meeting people face to face and talking with them. And even you don't have to be dynamic. You don't have to give them your business card. Well, I guess you probably should want to do that, but you don't have to make a huge impression. Don't put that much pressure on yourself. You just be there and be yourself.
Yeah. And that's one thing I found about going to these events. You don't need to be like on. You don't need to be a really interesting personality, because 99% of the people that I meet at these events, they're just friendly and down to earth, especially to newbies. So then they know that new people coming through doesn't mean less money for them. So they're really good. That's one of the other reasons why I keep going to these things. I went to the States last year, and I'm going early next year. And so it's about that networking and for me, the events are more about the networking than about the education, because there's great training from the stage, but the chance to hang out and eat in Barney's Beanery with you and Bond and everyone else, that's really the highlights for me.
Absolutely, it really is. It's important. So I think live events. Also, there's a lot of Facebook groups where you can be active. Without leaving your house. I know, you're in Thailand. We have friends in Australia, and they're all over the place. It's not as accessible, I know, to fly everywhere to go to events and travel. Let's face it, travel is a pain in the butt now. It really is.
It's a little easier here. I think that they don't have the restrictions here that they do over there.
There you go.
I remember the first time I had to take off my shoes in the US, and I'm like, why do I have to take off my shoes when I'm going through the security?
It's so dumb. It really, oh my gosh. Anyway, let's not even go there. What are we talking about? Oh, a mentor. Get a mentor. It can be a little pricey, but boy, it cuts the learning curve so fast. Otherwise, you may end up floundering around for years and years. Whereas if you have somebody to take you by the hand, you're going to get there a lot faster. That's something I do too, is I mentor people. I've been mentored. I'm still mentored. I mean, I think it's just a good lifestyle to have it built into your world. Stay on top of it, stay sharp. And sometimes it's an echo chamber when you just see your own writing and see your own stuff all the time, and it's nice to have an outside perspective.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and you can buy yourself some speed that way, and the thing is, it's a lot easier to make back the money that you invest in a mentor, and it's an investment, than it is to to get back the time. It's impossible to get back the extra years that it would take you to actually get to the same stage. It could be a decade that you're shortcutting.
That's very true. And this is not something that I did, but it's something that I would recommend, and something that I wish I had done earlier, is to find a niche that you really like and that you're really passionate about. And when you specialize, and I think that's something Dan Kennedy always said at the beginning, right? But when you specialize, you can charge more, you'll have more confidence, and it's really easy to be in the little circles. You're like, oh, Lorrie writes for the survival niche. That's what I'm doing now, which I love. And so now I'm finding more and more clients in that area, and it's delightful. I love it, and they're happy. So I think finding a niche it's desirable. It's not you don't have to, but I think it does separate you out from there's so much competition now. There's a lot of people, hanging out their shingle, like you said, after reading a single book. So how do you separate?
Yeah, true. That's really good advice. It's interesting from your perspective that because you have a niche that you write to. So that's definitely a way that people can shortcut the process to becoming, someone who gets regular work in that niche, rather than just because if you try and be everything to everyone, then you end up being nothing to nobody. So
that's right. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. What about people who have been successful without good copy? For instance, I've just taken on an e-commerce client who, he's done really well in his e-commerce business without really having any email copy or any particularly good copy on his website. Just through Google rankings, that he makes good money already. But what would be a good step for a business owner like that?
Well, it's interesting because even though that person sounds really successful, he's leaving money on the table if he's not, if he's letting the copy just sort of milk toast, right?
Yeah, because he's not a copywriter, so he doesn't know any of this stuff, but he just knows the e-commerce side of things, which has worked very much to a point.
Well, so what I would recommend for business owners like that, they probably don't want to learn to be a copywriter, because it does take a long time and a lot of dedication. I still believe that every single business owner should have a working knowledge of writing copy, because how do you know if it's any good? If you hire somebody, or if, like this particular example, if he's selling stuff and his copy's not very good. So if he had a working knowledge of it, he'd probably be able to connect to a lot more clients, make even more money. So I would recommend, if they don't want to become a copywriter, do have a working knowledge of it. But the cheapest way to do it, I think, is to hire somebody to edit your copy and just kind of give it like a brush up. Go over and just get an outside opinion, and that's what I would recommend personally. Because I do think people, even if they're successful, they are leaving money on the table if their copy sucks.
I agree 100%. And I've seen some of the emails that have been written either by him or by people he's hired in the past, and they wouldn't cut the mustard, in our world.
Right.
So I'll be working on a lot of that stuff. But he's not a trained copywriter in any way. So he's smart enough to outsource that to somebody, which is good.
That is good. That's another opportunity for newer copywriters or copywriters who are looking for work, is to kind of look around and see businesses that could use your help, and then approach them. There's nothing wrong with that, and just telling them you could help them. And one of the ways you could do that is to kind of give them sort of a free critique, like drug dealers give you a sample of the drug or something. So it's sort of like
get them hooked on your copy.
Exactly. So like give them a few headlines like this might really ramp up your sales, and that a lot of times will hook them in. They'll go like, oh, what else can she do? What else can he do?
Yeah. I mean, if this is true, I heard that Jay Abraham built up a name for himself by reactivating people's old direct mail lists, and he'd find someone with a list and send out the offer and get paid basically on the results of that campaign. So that's what he did early in his career.
Right. There you go. It never gets old. You can always learn from the guys who've been around forever.
Yeah. So, who is the funniest or the weirdest or the most quirky copywriter that you've known in the industry?
I know so many who are weird and quirky.
Yeah. And something that you can reveal, like, on this, because this is being recorded right now. So.
Yeah, I know. Exactly. That's why I'm trying not to pinpoint anybody in particular. But I'll tell you the strangest group of copywriters that I've run into is the seduction community. They're the ones who they peacock, right? So they dress up in like big hats and glasses and shiny pants or whatever that, and you go, who is that? But they're doing it to get attention, and they do. And it's funny, I met a couple of, I wouldn't call them copywriters, but to give them credit, they were studying, they went to John Carlton's event.
Yeah.
They were two of the guys who were in Neil Strauss's book, the game, right? Yeah. So two of those guys were at John Carlton's, and they weren't peacocking. They were just they're kind of gross. They're kind of like greasy and not, attractive and kind of shy. But what was interesting was at a break, John had like snacks in a bar and stuff. And I saw them, I knew enough of the seduction techniques to know what they were doing. Yeah. But I literally saw them like block me off from everybody else, neg me, where they say something negative about you have something in your teeth or something to make you self-conscious and take you off your guard. So I saw them like throwing all this stuff at me and going, this would work. This pisses me off. So I remember that, even though I knew what was going on. But at any rate, I wouldn't really call them copywriters. But I think the seduction community in general, because they're so flamboyant, quirky they definitely fit that. Yeah.
I haven't had much contact with them, so I wasn't sure. It's really interesting insight. Yeah.
Most definitely. They're definitely, what's really cool about copywriters, I think, is that they have a lot of personality, and not necessarily like they're super social or gregarious, but they tend to have a good sense of humor. And they laugh a lot. I don't know if you notice that. Do you see? Maybe it's just the people that I hang out with. But
yeah, I definitely agree with that. Like some of the guys. I mean, Kevin Rogers is one of the prime examples of that, isn't he?
Yeah. And just I think when you use your words a lot, you tend to be kind of witty and a little irreverent.
Yeah.
A little jaded, maybe, but
well. Then, when I was learning copywriting, Dan Kennedy was one of the funniest guys. He had that sense of humor that I really enjoyed. So,
absolutely, but he has this persona of being really gruff, and you can't talk to him, and which I understand why. Otherwise, he'd be bombarded all the time. But
yeah, true.
He's not really like that. He's just a softie. And he's very funny.
Yeah, he's one of the funniest.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, what about? Let's go back to the beginner copywriters again, because it's important, like you said, to get a mentor, and I know it's a big step to actually hire a mentor. But what else can somebody do if they wanted to learn more from you and find out about your trainings and about how you can help a new copywriter?
Well, basically just go to my site at redhotcopy.com, and there's ways to contact me there, and I read all my emails. I haven't, right now I'm teaching John Carlton's simple writing system, not my own course right now, but I probably will teach my own course again probably next year. But I do, if someone's interested in one-on-one stuff, I definitely have that available too. It's probably not as expensive as you think, and like you said, it's an investment in your education, and it does shortcut a lot of pitfalls. So
for sure, I'll definitely advise somebody to do that. But certainly to go to redhotcopy.com and check you out. The simple writing system, is that still open now, or is that closed off?
No, it's right in the middle of it right now. So unfortunately, it's not. You can keep your eyes open though, because it's a really good system. Yeah,
it comes out now and then, so it opens up. So in the meantime, there's plenty of stuff at redhotcopy.com. So everyone should definitely go there and check that out.
Thank you. I'm sorry this is so dark. It's getting darker.
No,
slowly getting sun's going down.
Yeah. The audio is the important part, but I can still see you. So
okay.
I appreciate your time today. I know you're busy and you've had to make arrangements to get on this call, so I really appreciate that.
My pleasure.
All the insights that you've given us are really interesting and extremely valuable for any copywriter. So thank you for that. And we will talk again soon.
Absolutely, Brian. Thank you. It was a lot of fun. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Geniuses of Copywriting with Brian Casangina. To get the full transcript and all the resources mentioned on today's show, go to www.geniusesofcopywriting.com now.